what's going on, guys? Another episode of the CTWpodcast. Here with Jason, as always. Jason, feels like it's been a minute since we've gotten together to talk about wrestling.
It has. I mean, it's only been what, like 2 weeks? Not even.
Might only be a week that we missed there. Obviously, had some pretty big life experiences. I saw that post that you put on the Uncensored page. My daughter Molly Mackin was born, I think it was late the 15th, whatever that Saturday was. It's the weekend of like around the 15th. I hope I got the date right. But yeah, it was just with my wife Gina, got out of the hospital where it was adjusting to being first-time parents, and yeah, it's been an experience. It's been a blessing. So I really appreciate all the support from everyone. And it's been great. My wife has been unbelievable so far. I sleep through anything. So when that baby cries, it's like, if I'm awake, I hear it. If I'm not, sometimes I'll roll over, wake up, and she's already taking care of business. And it's about 2 seconds till I go back to sleep. So probably not off to a great start as a husband or a father, but luckily I have a good wife as a foundation.
Hey, so, the baby is still alive, right? Then you're doing great.
So far, so good. Yeah, and a lot of times with situations like that, it's best that I step back and don't screw anything up. Luckily my wife is tough, but no, it's been a great experience so far. And I do want to thank everybody, for all the love and support that we received over the last couple of weeks. But aside from that, let's just get to today's episode. We got a little bit of a different one on our hands today. Went away from the coaching aspect, and this is sort of the first time we've done this, probably since the Tim Schwartz interview, where we talked about, how you can make the transition, still be involved in the sport, but then transition into journalism. Sitting down with Tucker Lutz, MMA fighter, graduate and wrestler for Franklin High School, talks about his wrestling experiences and now transitioning into mixed martial arts, an option that a lot of wrestlers have gone into, but maybe not enough to satisfy Tucker based on what we heard when we talked about.
Yeah, I mean, you see it a lot, but, you told me this before. It's like no one likes to get punched in the face. So that transition is obviously pretty good for wrestlers, but it's still, you're still fighting, and, there's still like some risks that are involved there. But I mean, we touch on this in the episode, but yeah, UFC dominated by wrestlers, and I don't see it slowing down anytime soon.
No, and you just look at Maryland, and there's some tough people that came up. In the last couple of years. Jordan Pryor comes to mind. I think would be amazing at it. Aaron Brooks, obviously, I think is going to dominate whatever he does. I think guys like that would be exceptional. They've got bigger fish to fry, at least for the short term. The life expectancy, the window of opportunity in collegiate wrestling is obviously much smaller. So maybe guys like that will make that transition in a couple of years, and I hope so. And like we sat down with Pat Downey, obviously something that he's looking towards, an avenue he's looking to explore.
Yeah, I mean, and like you said, you got 4, 5, maybe 6 years in college, and unless you're on that senior elite level, the opportunities to continue your competitive career in wrestling are few and far between. So UFC, you came up through the amateur ranks, were fighting professional for a while, and sure. There is more opportunities in the MMA field.
Yeah, absolutely. And, speaking of which, might be appropriate time to transition. This episode is brought to you by Ground Control Mixed Martial Arts. It's the premier MMA, jiu-jitsu, kickboxing gym in the Baltimore area. Hopefully, if anybody listens to this and they get the urge that they want to give it a shot, they'll look up Ground Control. It's where Tucker trains. Tucker, we talked about in the episode, he's a teammate of mine there. I came up training at Ground Control as well. And definitely, no matter what, you want to go to as far as that avenue of combat sport, but it's not just for that. There's most of the people that go there, it's for self-defense and fitness. They do have a top-notch fight team, and Tucker's an example of that. He fights on September 1st, this Tuesday, which might be tonight, depending on when this episode drops, at the Dana White Contender Series, which is a UFC event, and looking to fight for that UFC contract, a 3-fight contract on the line.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, not, people shouldn't think they're going to roll into ground control and it's just going to be a bunch of dudes like just whooping, punching everybody in the face. Like you got jujitsu, you got grappling, wrestling classes, all that kind of thing. So definitely check it out.
Christ, you've been in there before, for God's sakes.
I know, right? You tried to get me to jujitsu some guy, and he was like, "You a wrestler?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Oh no, I'm not doing that." So obviously, wrestling background gives you a little bit of an advantage as a going into the jujitsu and the grappling stuff, but it's still a different game as we get into when we're talking to Tucker.
Yeah, we thank Ground Control for the sponsorship of this episode. This episode is also brought to you by you, the listeners. This is pretty important. Something that I just found out here recently. Champions that Wrestle is looking to make a big splash here. One of the things they're looking to do is a wrestling facility that people can go to, and we can offer it. Jason, you want to talk about that some?
Yeah, I mean, now if you've been sort of looking at the opportunities to get back on the mat right now with the COVID situation, they are few and far between. So, CTW, Sean Gertz, and everybody included in that has been working hard to get a facility up and running to provide those opportunities. And it's not cheap, it's not cheap to run a facility, to rent one out, to build one, as many people have probably found over these past couple of months. There's, a couple of clubs out there. So, your donation coming in to help, get this facility started, and then hopefully it will kind of, the ball will roll after that. But anything that you can donate towards CTW itself will, I think right now it's priority number one is getting that facility up, getting kids back on the mat, wrestling, and trying to get some sense of normalcy back.
Yeah, and it looks like the magic number that we're looking to raise is $25,000. So obviously a big task ahead of us. Wrestling's all about taking on challenges. If you are able to support, no donation's too small, and certainly no donation is too big. You can contact us. Our website's championsinc.org. Also on all your social media platforms. Hit us up on Facebook, Instagram, whatever the case may be, and we'll put you in touch with the right people. Really appreciate all the support as always. Let's get to today's episode. Here's Tucker Lutz about to fight on the Dana White Contender Series. Yo, what's going on, guys? Another episode here of the CTWpodcast. Thank you for joining us. With me, as always, is Jason. Jason, what's going on, buddy?
What's up? I'm glad to get back at it. We've had, like a 2-week layoff?
I think it's only been a week off of I think we missed last week's episode as far as airing it goes. I think the week previous was Justin Wildy. But, yeah, it does seem like a really, really long time. So it's, my apologies. I think that's all on my end with the addition of the new family member in the Mackin household. So I have a baby girl that was born about a week ago. And it's been an adjustment period to say the least. So, trying to get back at it.
So you guys been waiting to do that for a while. So I'm excited for you guys to welcome to the parenthood family.
And Gina's right back to criticizing every move. So things seem to be normal on her end.
Great. It's, how she was doing, but that's great.
Yeah, it seems like everything's back to normal. Yeah, it's and it's weird. Like, Jason, you got 2 kids, so 2 daughters as well. It's it definitely a difficult and challenging task, but not nearly as tough as everybody makes it out to be. Like when you're getting ready, I think that most people just don't wrestle and are mentally weak and aren't prepared for a challenge. So
I agree.
Yeah. So. But no, it's cool. Like some of my theories that went on for 38 years of girls not using the bathroom just went right out the window almost immediately. And good buddy Adam DeCosmo actually hit me up when he found out. I don't think we didn't know whether we were having a boy or a girl. And I got a Facebook message from him that said, "Hey, congrats, man. Like I heard the baby came. I hope everybody's healthy. By the way, here's a link to the Spalding registration site." So he's already recruiting. I don't think he knew knew she was a girl yet. But enough about me. We don't want to bore everybody all day with this. I appreciate all the support and all the love that we've received, but let's get right to it. We are with a guest today, so we're going outside the normal realm. Normally we have coaches at different levels, whether it be collegiate, junior league, or high school, joining us and talking to us. This is a little bit different. As many people know, the route after competing at the amateur level in wrestling, the options are a little bit limited. And one of the popular ones, maybe the last decade or so, that people have been transitioning to is transition to the world of mixed martial arts, into the sport that you see in the Ultimate Fighting Championship, in the UFC, or MMA is how many people refer to it. Seems like wrestlers make a smooth transition. We have one of our locals, one of our own, Franklin High School grad, Tucker Lutz is here. Tucker, what's going on, buddy?
What's going on, brother? How are you?
Oh, happy to be here, man. Just happy to see you. How's training going? I probably should have entered with this, but Tucker's got a big fight in a week. Actually, I believe when this airs, it's going to be that evening. It's going to be Tuesday night, September the 1st, fighting in the UFC Dana White Contender series. And this is his first time on the big stage. So we're excited for that. You got to be excited yourself.
Yeah, I typically, honestly, for fights, I don't know what it is. I'm just stale, but I typically don't get pumped for fights. But this one, I'm actually pretty excited for. So yeah, it's obviously biggest opportunity I've had in my mixed martial arts career thus far. So it's just all about going in and capitalizing off of it.
So for those that aren't familiar, what is the Contender series? It's sort of like you want to explain like how it's contenders, right?
Yeah, so essentially they get guys who have been kind of nipping on the heels of the UFC on the regional scene, and you go down to Vegas. It's like season style, so they do it 8 Tuesdays in a row. They have 5 fights per evening, typically 5 fights. And you go in Vegas in front of Dana White, and you go, and if you have a good performance that evening, you get a UFC contract.
No, very cool. And it's up to this point. Now you're 9-1 as a pro. Is that correct?
Right.
Gotcha. And then you had obviously a very extensive amateur career where you racked up a couple regional amateur titles as well. But this is a big break. So far, all of your fights at the pro level have been at Shogun Fights, a local Baltimore promotion.
Yeah, most Shogun and the John Ogden Foundation. I fought once for that, but same. All my pro fights have been in the Baltimore area, so it'll be. I traveled a good bit. All my amateurs exclusively were out of state, but I've never flown in anywhere, so there will be a little bit of an element of being different than that. But other than that, still. But yeah, this is the first one I'll be doing some significant traveling for.
Okay. Now talk to me about the difference in competition level. Shogun Fights, an organization that's put on primarily in Baltimore, also is down at the MGM Harbor in DC, but typically in the Maryland region. What's going to be the difference of competition level? I know looking back at Shogun, you look at some of the names, Dustin Pegg, Jimmy Hedis, Cody Donovan, it seems to be an entry level to the UFC for the top of the line guys there.
Yeah, absolutely. Matt Selmelsberger, who is a Shogun vet, actually fought, I think it was last Saturday, and got a really good decisive win inside the UFC. A relatively short notice fight too. So yeah, the biggest difference is obviously the sample size of opponent has been mostly mid-Atlantic for my opponents. I fought a guy from Florida from ATT at the Ogden event. But the big difference is with Contender Series, it's really originally it was more of an international pool of fighters going in. Obviously, it's with COVID, it's been more national. But like the fellow that I'm fighting is he's based out of California, so obviously just the sample size of possible opponents. It's guys who have been killing it on the regional scene all over the country. Who get the opportunity to go out there and put a stamp on it in front of Dana.
Very cool. And then I know that recently. Just in the last couple of days, you had an opponent change. So originally supposed to fight Victor Martinez out of Texas. Now it looks like it's transitioning over to Chase Gibson. How does that work for you as far as you're getting dead set? I assume that you're training and you're game planning for a typical type of fighter, and now you have to transition. Were there a lot of adjustments that you need to make here with the short notice fight a week out?
Yeah, so it was honestly pretty annoying. I found out it was like Thursday evening of last week, which would have put us like around 10 days out from the fight. And I guess, he got some type of injury, so wish him a speedy recovery on that, obviously. But honestly, what's been nice is probably at least half of my opponents on the regional scene have been on 3 weeks, sometimes less, due to injury and pullouts, just the nature of the sport. So I'm just grateful to be in that position for a lot of my career of having to deal with the last-minute shuffling. Luckily, the MMA gods blessed me a little bit. The matchup-wise isn't too far different. Pretty similar as far as each opponent's approach to their game of plan. But yeah, I'm just glad that this isn't something new to me. But at the same time, it's frustrating for me because we found out about this matchup pretty far in advance. It was about 10 weeks out, so we were dialed in, pretty opponent specific. So last minute audibles of tweaking some stuff, but it is what it is.
No, I got you. What is a typical training day like for you? So a fighter at this level, is it multiple workouts a day? Is it, do you just go in for a lengthy period of time? Obviously, there's so many aspects you need to work on. How would you change up or structure your training, the scheduling of it? So
this camp was pretty similar to my last camps. I just added a few sessions. Sorry about that. Someone trying to call me. So I work a full-time job on top of training. So I do HVAC. I'm an install mechanic. Luckily, my company's great, and they gave me off for the last 4 weeks. So it's been nice to focus solely on training. But for most of my time, I get home around 5 o'clock and jet straight to the gym. And for me, because I'm working during the day, it's just session after session. So Monday, Wednesday, I do jiu-jitsu. Then it's followed by striking, and then followed by conditioning after that. So it's been nice the last 4 weeks. I've been able to space that out, having my days open. But yeah, what's worked best for me in the past, just with the hand that I'm dealt with my work situation, it's pretty balls to the wall, session after session after session, and rinse, wash, repeat the next day.
COVID situation changed anything for this setup as opposed to your last fight?
The one thing that's changed is I'm very particular with the guys who I've been working with. So I won't say it's jiu-jitsu. I'm not just going to pick someone up who rolls into class. I've been working mostly with the same, probably around 9 guys, including training partner, maybe a little more. The entire camp, and about half, if not more, have been tested. So right. I've been tested twice thus far.
Tight, and you're going to be. What's the procedure too? You get tested when 48 hours before the fight?
So they flew me out early July for some media stuff. I got tested then. Last Saturday, they do like a home swab that you send in before you fly out. Now I touch down Saturday, get tested again, then 24-hour quarantine, and then I want to say it's either the day of the fight or the evening after weigh-ins, they test us again. So there will be 2 more tests once I get back in there, or back to Vegas rather.
Yeah, and I mean, we've already seen, a couple, fights that have had to, that have changed. If one of you I guess if your opponent tests, do they have any backup plans, or is that just, hey, we're going to try it again at another point?
Yeah, so for Contender Series, it seems to be that they push it back 3 weeks is what I've heard, and
right.
So I guess I would imagine they'd probably just keep the same opponent and push it back. And they just push it back 3 weeks. So hopefully we don't have to go. We don't have to worry about that. So I'm a bit of a recluse by nature, but this camp, like I said, I've hardly left the house. So I've been really paranoid of getting popped for it.
Oh, very cool. And then you talked about how you did have a full-time job. As a lot of people know, I come from an MMA background as well. And I kind of had the same sort of route where the beginning part of my pro career, I had a full-time job. I was working as a correctional officer and then having to work my training in around my work schedule. And then I started fighting full time. But when I was fighting full time, I had a hard time with almost the extra hours. It was like I almost needed something like work to take my mind off of it. I eventually found that, like, through coaching as well, coaching wrestling. Do you find that this extra time, is it are there negative components to it?
No, it's been 1,000,000% a net positive. I'm the kind of dude who's always doing shit, so it frees up a lot of time. Like, for example, I got about an acre of land, so even just doing dumb shit of maintaining my yard, I have all the time in the world to do stuff like that. I wake up early for work, so I'm constantly kind of in a state of sleep deprivation. So I've actually been recovering this camp, which has been amazing. So no, I don't have any issues at all. And I know there's several guys who, once they made that transition to, that's all they did is they kind of, their view on it shifted and they felt like it was a job to them, which was a negative, but not I, man. I've been loving it, man. I can't get enough of it.
Nice. And tell me about Chase Gibson, your opponent coming up. What do you know about him? Any holes that you're seeing in his game? I don't want you to give away your game plan necessarily, but is there anything that you see yourself utilizing that you're just a cut above him in the MMA game?
Yeah, anywhere this fight goes, there's just no way he stands a chance. If it's standing, I feel like I'm going to hurt him on the feet. If it goes to the ground, I'm either going to smash him with a ground and pound, or I would love to. I've been working really, really hard on my jiu-jitsu this camp, getting my technical aspects down. More so, kind of making my bottom game more dangerous. But I feel like offensively, I've grown in the last 8 weeks more so than I ever have on my jiu-jitsu. So if it touches the floor, I have supreme confidence I can either stop him with the strikes or sub him out. He's quick. I'll give him that. I still think I'm way faster. I feel like my hand speed is an underrated attribute for me. But really, it's one of those things that no matter where this fight goes, I'm a step ahead. And I feel like I'm in a very good position going into this matchup. He's also going to be smaller than me. He mostly fights at 45. My fight is at 55 next Tuesday. Most of my pro fights have been at 45, but I put on some serious muscle this camp because I had the room to afford it. So it's annoying having the last minute change, like I said, but if it works out in anyone's favor, it's mine. Absolutely.
Okay. Now, you talked about putting on the weight. I know coming up when I was fighting, it was almost like we were scared to lift because everything was about cut weight, cut weight, cut weight, cut weight, similar to almost like the old school wrestling philosophy. Have you noticed a change in that? It looks, from an outsider's perspective, somebody that's not currently fighting, like people are more open to going up in weight and putting on muscle and healthy weight. Have you noticed that being a trend?
Yeah, that's absolutely a trend. I mean, you look at some of the top 10 guys across all weight classes. Some of them are, new to that weight class because they're not sucking themselves out. And that's really what it is. So I feel way fresher at 55 than I ever have at 45. I think my performances speak to that also. That being said, I feel like I still can go down 45, especially if I'm not working the full-time job. But there's definitely an upward trend. I feel super strong at 55 also. And like you said, people definitely did shy away from the weightlifting. Luckily for me, which has been huge, is working with a strength and conditioning coach. My buddy Nick Ehrlich, I've been working with him for about 1.5 years now. Because I'm not too privy to all the right training protocols. I honestly hate doing strength and conditioning, so it's nice having someone to delegate and keep me accountable in that realm. Gotcha.
Cool. And now, when you say strength training, talk to me about that a little bit, because I think there's probably some similarities between the type of strength training wrestlers should be doing and MMA fighters. It's more than just bench pressing, curls, and your day throwing iron around. Do you do more functional fitness, or do you hit the weights pretty hard, just traditional old school style?
Yeah, I don't do much as far as, off season, I'll do kind of 5x5s, your old school kind of strength building, but a lot of it's plyo based, mixing in explosive movements with weights also. Not doing crazy weights, but doing exercises with the added weight to it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and it's, it's something, weight training is obviously something I know nothing about. Did you do a lot coming up, like even when you were wrestling in high school and whatnot?
Weight training? No, not really. I mean, I was a 12-season athlete, so football, they always wanted us in there. And you know how it's like the old school, slow squats, deadlifts, bench, all that. There wasn't, back, like I said, I graduated in 2012. There wasn't a whole lot of hybrid training, mixing plyos in with strength. But, so no, not in wrestling. I did no, it was all, you know, sprints and shit like that. It was never any type of weight movement with it, which I hope. I haven't been to a high school practice in a while, but I'd love to see that kind of stuff mixed in with it.
Sure. Yeah, the functional stuff. Now, like, let's talk about you as a wrestler coming up. When did you start? Did you come up in the Reisterstown Junior League?
I did. I started, I think I was in the 3rd grade. I started in the Reisterstown Junior League when John Schuster was the head coach and Mr. Trudell, I can't remember his first name. And I did that for a couple of years, and then the Reisterstown program kind of fizzled out. This was years ago. I don't remember why. So I was with Reisterstown for 2 years, and then I went to Owings Mills for 2 or 3 years. It wasn't with Coach Pritzker. It was with Coach Jay Munchnick. He was running it. And then I bounced back to Reisterstown under Coach Tom Montagna, and then Franklin High School.
Okay, and then like Franklin High School. I know you were a regional finalist there, state qualifier. Never made the state podium or anything like that. Did you do a lot of off-season wrestling, or was it more just seasonal based because of the other sports and commitments?
Yeah, I never did anything off-season, and that's pretty much my failures and shortcomings in wrestling is essentially what drove me to be successful in MMA, because even, I mean, football, wrestling, lacrosse, I was always kind of upper middle of the pack. Like you said it best, in wrestling, I gave good guys tough matches, you know. But like I said, never did a lick of off-season training. So in my season, I would bust my ass and work hard. But at that top level, it's not enough. You got to be doing it year-round, on it year-round. And honestly, I was just mentally weak back then. I don't think I had the capacity to be successful in wrestling. You know, it's a long season. You're making weight 2-3 times a week. And it's the toughest sport I've ever done. So I think failing in wrestling my senior year, realizing there was no 5th shot on it, really made me think. Ever since watching MMA, it was one of those things. I was like, you know what, I can do this. But I was like, man, if I do, this needs my whole attention to live it, and I've been doing that. I started training mixed martial arts as a system at the age of 17, my senior year of high school. And it's crazy. We're 8 years down, August, I had my first amateur fight in 2012. And this is the only thing in my life that I've ever actually had full attention towards. And it's kind of bittersweet because I feel like if I would have had this attention towards wrestling, I could have been 3-4 times state champ, but I'm just making up for it at this point.
Do you regret it at all, or are you pretty happy with how it turned out? Like, did you have enough gratification from football and lacrosse that it kind of makes up for, like, looking back and wishing, or not necessarily wishing, but realizing if you put more towards wrestling, you could have achieved more?
I honestly don't regret it. I used to say, man, if I could go back, I would wrestle year round. But nah, man, there's nothing like the lesson of pain to teach you. You know what I'm saying? And after states for months, it was a hard pill to swallow that there was no other option or there was no going back rather. And that the reason why I was unsuccessful was 100% my doing, So
right.
There's no better lesson than pain. So I don't think I would change a damn thing about it.
Okay. No, and then you talked about making, going from your senior year in high school, making the transition to MMA, always a fan of it. What was that transition like right out the gate? Is it like your first practice in there, you realize you're meant for this?
Honestly, I think so. I went my first class ever. It was a small gym in Carroll County. I'm not even sure if they're still around. So I went, and I think it was actually like a wrestling class, but they did live no-gi rolls. And there was a dude in there who was training for an amateur fight, and they threw me in with him. And there was just something about, they had the small gloves and the live rolls, being able to punch someone in their guard. There's nothing like it in the world. And I took to it really quickly. Like, I think I had my first amateur fight like 2 months after training formally. But yeah, I mean, one of those instant fell in love. I was doing lacrosse practice. Then my mom would give me a ride because I didn't have a license over to the gym afterwards because classes were at 8 back then. And I just instantly got, fell in love with it, really.
What do you think? I mean, obviously, the transition from wrestling to, jiu-jitsu and all that seems to be pretty, I mean, what do you think it is about that? Do you think wrestlers kind of, they already kind of have that positioning so they can kind of get better at it faster and like, so that's how they get into it? It's like, or I mean, you think the mentality aspect of it or like, what is it about wrestlers going into MMA jiu-jitsu?
Yeah, so I think it's probably all of that, just because most wrestlers who are successful have been doing it, that I've noticed, who are successful kind of at the state level, a lot of them have been doing it since they were like 6, 7 years old. So they have a lifetime of controlling and manipulating people's bodies. Obviously, like when I first started in wrestling, there's a learning curve as far as bad habits and getting hit with arm bars and triangles and all that. But just the sheer fact of one, you've been, like I said, wrestling is the toughest sport in my opinion. So you've been embracing the grind for most of your life, oftentimes here, and the toughest sport ever. You have the awareness and the skill to control someone because you've been doing it your whole life. And just whoever has the control, that's who's winning, and the sport is dominated by, as far as UFC goes, the champs are dominated by wrestlers. So I think it's all that. Just, and like I said, being able to embrace the suck, man. Wrestling is the hardest shit I've ever done in my life.
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah, the mental aspect. I've heard a lot of people say is that's more why wrestlers have kind of risen to the top. Not necessarily the actual technique wise. It's just like, hey, they're used to going through that grind and sort of persevering and dealing with adversity as opposed to some of these guys coming up in boxing and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, I agree, man, 100%. Like
now,
it's the hardest I've ever trained is wrestling.
Now, when you started training, was it pretty much, all right, I'm going to use my wrestling to find a way to win? Or when you started competing, it seems like you took on a competition very shortly after you started training at all. And was it like, okay, like, I know I'm a better wrestler, I'm going to take this guy down, grind this out? Or was it, like, did you always have hands, always have striking capabilities, submission capabilities, and whatnot?
Yeah, so going into it, my coaches at the time, because like I said, I wasn't a great wrestler, but MMA wrestling is a completely different system, in my opinion. There's the distance, there's the strikes to it, and I just adjusted really well to MMA wrestling as a system. And like I was working, at the age of 18, I was working with guys in the UFC able to mix up punches to the takedown and actually get them down. Holding them down was a different thing. But so from the jump, we worked really hard on the micro disciplines of working on my striking and not getting subbed off my back, and then also being comfortable being on my back, which, that's the last place you want to be as a wrestler. So it's kind of weird at first breaking that mold. But honestly, mentally, it was always, no matter how much I would work the striking, no matter how much I would work, the BJJ off my back, I think it was my 4th amateur fight was the first time that I ever threw a strike standing up, So, like, within the other fights, it was going for a takedown. I mean, probably within 30 seconds of the fight, just getting out of that comfort zone,
Yeah, I got to think that's habitual, too, in a sense. You've been wrestling for so long, and that's where, your instinct takes you back to once the whistle's blown, so to speak. I know that's not the case in MMA, but the bell rings, it's, you're going to go right back to being instinctual in some sense.
Yeah, especially when the punches and the kicks are flying, you're going to go back to what's home. And for me, yeah, it was my 4th amateur fight. I fought Eddie Alvarez's little brother, and it ended up being mostly a stand-up fight. And that was the first time that I think I ever I don't know if thrown, but it was the first time I think I ever landed a punch standing up. So it definitely took a while to get out of that comfort zone of falling on the wrestling, for sure.
Yeah, and then obviously things have changed quite a bit. We have knockouts on your, see knockouts on your resume, submissions on your resume. What would you define yourself as a fighter? How would you classify yourself? You hear people say striker, grappler. What's Tucker Lutz defined as?
I always say that I'm a boxer and a wrestler. I have good kicks, but mostly mostly it's hands for me and top pressure on the wrestling, you know. But lately, like probably my last 3 fights, I've phased really more into dominating on the striking, probably more than that. 2 fights ago, I took on Cole Presley, Shogun Fights, who's a very tough opponent, known for his chin, and I knocked him out in under 2 minutes with an uppercut, and that fight didn't go to the floor at all before that. But honestly, it's one of those things. I came up during the time of MMA, which I'm grateful for, that there's no specialists. You know, the early days of UFC, it was jiu-jitsu versus wrestling, boxing versus kickboxing, karate guys mix it in there. So I started training MMA as a complete system at the age of 17. So I've always been proud of representing that generation of being good everywhere. But I feel like, honestly, the last few fights people would look at my fights and consider me a striker these days.
Right, and now you found a home. Well, I won't say now you found a home. Been there for quite a while, though. At Ground Control, one of the oldest gyms in the state, and for MMA. John Rallo started it in the early 2000s, maybe even late 90s. Talk to me about your team over there at Ground Control and some of the guys that you get to train with.
Yeah, so I started off at a small gym in Carroll County. I think I had 5 amateur fights with them. Fight team fizzled out, so I came over to Ground Control, and the guys over there were really adamant about me focusing competitively as an amateur on the micro disciplines. So what was nice about that is I had kickboxing fights, I had boxing fights or matches, I had jiu-jitsu tournaments and competition. But coming from a small gym to a gym like Ground Control, who when I joined we had 4 locations, now we have 3. Rosedale. I'm mostly at our Owings Mills location. We got a Columbia location. So there was a lot of options for coaches in different areas, but there's also a very strong competitive MMA team. So there's great minds with people who could throw it all together too. So when I first came to Ground Control, it was, hammered into my head, like, you're going to focus on, for certain periods of time, this discipline. You're going to go out there, you're going to compete. And at the end of the day, it will help out your all-around game, and it obviously has. In 2015, as an amateur, I won a national kickboxing title. I wish I would have done more amateur boxing because I love boxing. It's probably my favorite micro discipline. I only had 1 match. If I could go back, I feel like as a professional, I would do well in boxing too. But then also just having the veterans, the Binky Jones is in there. John Rallo has a great mind for MMA, and now our fight team. We got guys like me who, it's probably, it's not, I'm the first one to take that big leap, but it could have been me or 5-6 other guys on our team. Guys like me, guys like Skylar Sudo, Jesse Stern, Pat Rivera, guys who have been trained in MMA as a system for a long time. On our fight team Fridays, which is it's not just fight sim. We do a fight sim sparring Tuesday and then fight team practice, which, we work wall work, we work stand-up rounds exclusively, wrestling, all of that. I mean, we've been having 25, 30 guys there, different guys from the DMV area creeping in to work with us. So it's great, man. It's great. You're only as good as your weakest link, and we got straight killers on the team pushing every week. So I'm really excited. That's pretty recent, these numbers. It's been building up the last few years, but these numbers are pretty recent of this year. Especially we got guys coming in from other gyms too. So so feel free to roll through. Anyone in the DMV area who wants to be successful in MMA, come through Friday. We don't have any egos about, this guy's from Level Up or this guy's from Conquest. Sign a waiver, and we're all making each other better. Yeah,
now, that's one of the things is, and our target audience is exclusively fans of Maryland wrestling, I feel like. Are you surprised that some of the upper echelon wrestlers haven't made that transition yet? Obviously, we talked to Pat Downey a couple of weeks back, and he's looking to go that route. But there's some really good local wrestlers around that would make good fighters. Have you noticed that there just hasn't really been that big transition into MMA from the local Maryland wrestlers at all?
I have noticed, and it's a damn shame. But also, I come from the school of thought that you can't force anything on anyone. You know what I'm saying? Because people just will grow to hate it. Like, I've seen it a million times. Like the prototypical wrestler dad who's hard to shit on their kid, and then they get burnt out by their sophomore year, and then who knows what could have happened. So I'd love to see an influx of wrestlers, but I try not to push it on them because it's a tough pursuit. Like, it's not the sport you want to get into if you're chasing the paper. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, I've been a professional for 5 years now, and I've had to work a full-time job this whole time. It's not a get-rich-quick thing. Day in and out, grinding. There's obviously the brain damage aspect of it that people need to be cognizant of. This is not, this is dangerous stuff that we're talking about. But me, and I think the MMA community as a whole agrees that wrestling is the strongest base. So I'd love to see that come up. And I mean, you've been to a fight team practice, Jason. You got to come by soon. But there's all levels come Friday. You know what I'm saying? So I think there is an intimidation factor. Like people think, man, I don't want to come in and get the shit kicked out of me. But we got guys like a training partner of mine, Ray, who actually jumped in on my fight sim stuff for a fight that I had last November. And we're all mostly professionals, but the great majority of guys are professional. There's not going to be people knocking out a green dude. If you want to come get your feet wet, it's not an easy practice, but most of that is from the conditioning and the pace of it. But I'd love to see some of these wrestlers, guys like, David Hollingsworth and Tyson McDuffie. They've been to some of the practices. Obviously, they're at school now. I'd love to see. I feel like those guys could be some straight killers. And I've noticed that guys who have a good wrestling background seem to get the learning curve of striking and jiu-jitsu more so coming from like a boxer coming into MMA or a jiu-jitsu guy coming into MMA,
Okay, and so you're endorsing that you're under the school of thought that if you could pick one background to come from and make the transition to MMA, you think it's wrestling?
Oh, yeah. I don't think there's any debate. Look at the UFC champs now. There might be 2 out of like whatever the 7 or 9 weight classes that don't have some form of either high school or highly successful college backgrounds, There's probably Alexander Volkanovski and the flyweight champ. And
okay.
Before that, it was Henry Cejudo. So, and obviously he's a wrestler.
Yeah, and it's it's kind of fun to watch too. Now, me being a huge fan of NCAA wrestling, seeing some of like the top guys that have made the transitions over the years, Askrens, Johnny Hendricks, and guys, Josh Koscheck is another one. But there's been plenty that I saw compete in college. I then got to see compete in the UFC. But not everybody needs to be a superstar, it seems like. It seems like somebody can come with just a nice fundamental wrestling background and be extremely successful in MMA.
I agree. I mean, look at myself. You know what I'm saying? I plan on being a world champion within the next 3 years. And like I was mostly like a middle of the pack wrestler. You know what I'm saying? I just think that I did it for a while. I wasn't very successful, but just having that base technique of years of being on the mat. I mean, and I think the work ethic is probably even more important than that. So I agree. If you look at it, the sport's dominated by wrestlers, kind of has been since the inception until the beginning waves. Jiu-jitsu kind of dominated, but I think that, and I learned this a lot. This camp is, I'll go with guys. I started working with guys in the jiu-jitsu realm, mixing in the ground and pound. And when you're able to punch and have strong top pressure, it's a lot harder to tap a guy out, and then obviously having that good top pressure coming from wrestling, good base. It's a deadly combination if you have some submission awareness, strong ground and pound, and and that wrestling background.
Absolutely. Now let's you talked about it a little bit earlier that you were flown out to Vegas last month, you said?
Yeah, I think it was beginning of July, if I remember right.
Okay, talk me through that. Like, what's all of my fight experience has been at the regional level. Never been exposed to anything to the level of the UFC or anything like it. You get flown out there a month early for production things. What does a day like that look like?
Yeah, not to sound ungrateful, but it was a really, honestly, painfully boring trip. Obviously with COVID. So we flew in there. I want to say we touched down at the hotel. The UFC has a host hotel that they booked the whole thing up. We touched down within, less than a minute. They test you for COVID. Then you go up in your room. You get the results back the next day. And if that's the case, then they shuttle you over to the UFC Apex Center for the production stuff. But really, and it's like they run you through like a quasi workout. My buddy Pat Rivera came with me and held some pads for the production. Luckily, I had a doctor's appointment and an eye doctor's appointment. So I got to kind of drive around, and sightsee. But other than that, they lock you down in the hotel after that. So that was pretty boring. I'm not going to lie. I've been out to Vegas before for my bachelor party in 2018, and I can say that was way more fun than this trip was.
No, that's cool. You talked about the Apex. What exactly is that? What's the UFC Apex?
So the original one was the UFC Performance Institute. They still have that, and anyone, if I'm informed correctly, it's anyone on the roster has access to that. So they have physical therapists, nutritionists, recovery things for guys who get out of surgery. So that's I think a big use of it. And then there's like offices in there. And then you have the Apex Center, which I think they just kind of ran out of room. And that's why I'm not quite sure what exactly the whole purpose of that is. But there's been all the fights in Vegas post-COVID have happened there. And I think that was kind of dedicated to the Contender Series fights, which I'm competing on next week. And I would imagine the Ultimate Fighter fights, if that ever comes back around, would be going down there too. But I mean, it was pretty cool. They had similar workout equipment like they have in the Performance Institute, not as much, but yeah, I guess it's just a center that guys on the roster can go and use if they're in Vegas, really.
Yeah, and you talked about post-COVID a little bit. This is going to be weird, probably, in the sense that there's going to be no fans in the stands. Like, is that going to be tough for you, or is it going to be like sparring, where you're used to not having more times than not when you're punching somebody in the face, there's nobody watching you other than your teammates and coaches. But like, it's still going to be a little bit different for being a competition. There not being thousands of people there watching you like usual. What do you think that's going to be like?
For me, I don't think I'll be affected at all. Like you said, there's probably more people at sparring just because there's classes going on. So it'll be just kind of like another night in the office. And I've honestly tended to perform better in sparring than my fights, so I'll take it if it's anything like that. But no, I've honestly never been one, because Shogun at Peck's a good house. It's 5,000-6,000 people in there, and I've never really been noticed. I've never been one to notice the crowd. Like, it's out for the walkout. It's obviously pretty cool. The only time I've ever noticed someone was I got kneed in the balls against Cole Presley. This was April of 2019, and I'm like kind of walking it off, and I see one of his homies, and he's like, "Pussy!" And that's like I think that's the only time I've ever noticed like fans like that. Obviously, the walkout energy might be different, but like I said, if my performance is anything like sparring, I should start them pretty quickly.
You probably should be able to hear your coaches a little bit easier too, like yelling stuff from the corner and stuff.
That is also true, but I'm also like my coaches know, I'm not one who needs a ton of corners. Sometimes like too much is a little overwhelming for me. But so no, I'd rather have someone there, but I could go in there with no corner and I think I'd be fine.
Sure. At the end of the day, it's you in there doing the work, right? Like, it's instincts take over, like we were talking about before, and you've trained hard for it, so you know exactly the adjustments that you need to make. Getting back to the guy that was heckling you, you're in the middle of a title fight, a professional MMA fight in front of thousands of people, and some guy calls you a pussy. What goes through your head? Do you like chuckle at it? Do you get pissed? Is it in one ear out the other? What happens there?
I did indeed chuckle. I didn't get upset about it, but I was just like, and it turns out a good friend of mine, Ronnie Glazer, he owns Owings Mills Pawn Shop and sponsors me for a lot of fights. Great guy, but he got really emotional about it. Like, he called me the Monday after and apologized because I think he was almost escorted out. I had no idea. It was like, my bad, man. So I called him. I was like, what's going on? So apparently that same dude, because once it got back to action, it had to have been less than a minute. I knocked his boy out, and it was pretty bad. He was out cold, and he was like, yeah, that's why my boy put your guy to sleep, and apparently it was a thing. But when you break down like that, that's a strange dynamic, though. Like, I'm, not to be hyperbolic, but putting my life on the line, and someone would call you a pussy. It's funny. All you can do is chuckle at that.
Yeah, and it's, the other funny thing is like, I've met Cole before. I've known him over the years. He was even fighting when I was competing for a little bit of time. Couldn't be a nicer guy. Like, one of the nicest guys. And you feel like if it's just the two of you in a room, it's going to be two guys getting along and showing respect for each other. But then you throw in the drunk fans, and like, they have a bigger problem with you than your opponent does. Meanwhile, he's the one who has to punch you. So it's they get kind of crazy.
Yeah, it's funny how that works, man. And it's like, I don't like, so my older brother, Teddy, he gets super riled up at fights. And it's like, I get cheering, but like insulting people, I don't condone that. But, and I know my fans do it. There's obviously not shit that I can do about it. But, like calling someone a pussy or, it's just, and obviously alcohol is a big, instigator in that regard. But I think it's it's the most dangerous sport as far as I'm concerned. So people make the argument that boxing is because of the 10 count, and I could see that too. So if not, it's one of the most dangerous sports. I would imagine in most cases, someone just busted their ass for 6 to 9 weeks of their life and are trying their hardest. So I don't think there's a whole lot of room for the insults, man. They're obviously not pussies.
Yeah, you got to that. Each fighter has got that respect, and it's the sort of the ancillary people that are just like getting into it.
Yeah, and it's
always two guys from the crew. It's never the actual guys fighting.
Of course, man. Of course. But I mean, that's honestly because I think like when 2014, 2015, when Connor came on the scene, it was like shit talking was the thing. And other people tried to do it and they weren't nearly as witty or charismatic as him. And it came off so disingenuous and cringy. But it seems like that's kind of getting reeled out a little bit, and it's back to the respect, which is what I prefer. I've never been much like I'll shit talk some homies of mine for sure. I'm a troll in that regard, but some that I'm fighting, I have a deep respect for them because they do bring out the best of me. You know what I'm saying? And I appreciate that from them.
Yeah, it's weird because I've heard interviews. I know you were on 105.7 The Fan before. Actually been on a couple of their different, even like a sit down interview on an online platform. I think, or TV that you did with Ed Norris, but you do have a confidence about you still, where it's not arrogance, it's not shit talking, but it's very matter of fact. I'm going to knock this guy out. I guarantee this guy's going out in the first round. But it's not talking them down or belittling them in any way. Is that just kind of you're just speaking your what's coming to your mind?
That's just what I think. I think. You don't work as hard as I do and lack confidence. You know what I'm saying? I put my all into this. I really, especially this camp, it's one of those that I have a deep feeling of content because it is that no stone left unturned feeling. But at the same time, you can't go in there shaky, man. You can't. You have to. I'm absolutely certain that I'm going to finish this guy Tuesday, September 1st. And I felt like that pretty much all of my fights, I've been wrong before, but not Tuesday. That's for damn sure.
Do you think with the shit talking and stuff like that, is there pressure out there, or at least there was when the Conor McGregors were coming up, to do that to kind of get noticed? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Kind of marketable, right? Because that's one of the things I sort of have against the MMA and boxing realm is like, you have to accept fights, right? Like, and, if you're up and coming, like people don't want to fight you and they always want to fight someone that they think they can beat and all that kind of stuff. And to get to the UFC, they want a marketable person.
Yeah, absolutely. More so like homies than actual coaches and people who consultation I take seriously. They'll say, man, you got to talk shit and blah, blah, blah. It's just not me. I'm not sure if I'd be any good at it. Probably would be, but it would be disingenuous. And I honestly, it's just as far as getting noticed, because I've been, especially Contender series, like MMA Junkie did an article, but for my career, I've kind of been under the radar. And I just have always thought that if I'm myself, which I'd be super disappointed in myself if I ever leaned any way to try to get some paper here and there. I'm just a hardworking blue collar dude. I come from a family who has always done type of work with their hands. And I feel like people can actually resonate with me. I never want to put on any type of front. And I just feel like it's one of those things. I'm going to be successful in this sport. And if I don't sell, it is what it is. I can put my head on the pillow at the end of the day, feeling better about it than if I were to, bullshit and fucking try to put on some persona. You know what I'm saying? At the end of the day, like I said, I do HVAC work. I did golf course maintenance, landscaping, tree removal before that. I'm just a normal blue collar, value hard work, love my family, and And if that shit doesn't sell, then fuck you, you know?
Well, and it's weird. I think you and I have talked a little bit about this before. You look at the commercial now for this season of Contender that's currently in progress. And it was, I think I mentioned to you before, it's like you're almost unique because of how normal you are, where you see all these interviews with the person saying like I was homeless or, you know, unfortunately they either were into drugs or had relatives that were. And meanwhile, here's Tucker who, I have a wife and a full-time job. What's up? Like, you know, and it seems like you're the unique one in that, like, you know, in that community almost. And, you know, hopefully that does sell and people learn to appreciate you. And especially if you just keep on being genuine and
you got to be authentic no matter what, you know what I mean? And like I said, if you fake it, like people definitely don't resonate with that.
Absolutely. And it's so easy to see who's full of shit too these days, you know? But yeah, I was joking with my trainer, Nick. I was like, man, my dad should have been more of a deadbeat. I'd be all over these fucking commercials, you know? And it's also one of those things, like I've had struggles, you know, in the past. I don't need to prostitute out my hardships, you know? And I don't want to hate on anyone who's had a struggle and they're sharing, but, you know, I'm also at the same time, I come from a good family. I'm not some trust fund kid. I've moved out and been on my own since I was like 19 years old. You know what I'm saying? All I know as an adult until like probably 2 years ago. And that's because my wife is the breadwinner. All I've known is, you know, living by the skin of my teeth. And at the end of the day, if there was one, cause I hate to say it, but this is a business too. So there's people that I would like to cater to, but if there was one crowd that I could reach and maybe capitalize off of building a following, it's just this type of people who are me, who are blue collar, hard working, working class, and are dream chasing really.
Do you think MMA is taking over boxing as far as the popular combat sport?
I do. People love to think that there's a disparity in money because they see purses from Floyd's and the Pacquiao's, but they don't see that there could be someone on that on the Maymac card who's making like less than $1,000. They only see the anomalies. I just think as far as press goes, I think as far as the frequency of events, I think that MMA is definitely more popular. I don't take it personally as a competition because I love boxing. But I do think as far as mainstream interest, it's got to be MMA. Just look at the numbers, man. I think it is.
Why do you think that is? I have a few theories, but what do you think is the driving factor with it?
I think the consolidation of good guys, the lack of politics and cross promotion. I think there's too many promoters in boxing. I think I think MMA could use more weight classes, but I think the not having a weight class every 3 pounds helps. So there's like serious championship going on. There's obviously politics in every professional sport, but in large, I believe that MMA is significantly better in the best people fighting the best people in the prime of their career, and that shit sells fights, man.
Yeah, and I always thought, and you know, I could be wrong, but you know, when MMA really started kind of exploding, somebody like you know, been asked the same question before, and one of the things I thought was just the English or the American market is going to be what's really selling. It seems like, you know, if you could be popular in the United States, you can eventually expand to be global. I always thought the UFC did a good job of marketing their individuals, and it seemed like for a while boxing, it was very dominated by Eastern European and the Hispanic market, that they didn't necessarily even speak English, some of the best guys and the most popular guys. Where like you see somebody like George St. Pierre, he spoke with an interpreter his first UFC fight when he fought Karo Parisian. And then, you know, he's speaking English by the end of it. He's no longer speaking through an interpreter. I just thought that the stars that spoke English, I thought that was a big factor in it. It made it easier to relate to the people when they were competing. But I don't know. I could be wrong about that. You know, who knows?
I would agree with that, and that's why I think Also, you see, because a lot of good kickboxers are European, and Muay Thai obviously is Asian. There's that language barrier, and there's no presence in the state, unfortunately, because they're both great sports, in my opinion. Obviously, I'm biased towards them. But yeah, absolutely. It's you want to get the American market, you're going to want to get someone who speaks some English, you know what I'm saying? And I think that's where a lot of times boxing did come up short.
Sure. Now, do you think Shogun, because one thing I'll say about Shogun fights is I've been to a lot of different promotions, right? I've either as a competitor, a fan, or even a coach some of the time. But Shogun seems to do a really good job with the production, the atmosphere.
Yes.
You know, their fights get televised. Like you walk out on a ramp with like the smoke machines and the big screens. Do you think that's going to help your transition into the UFC?
I haven't thought about that much, but I would imagine it does. Because it is weird. Like the moment you touch down Shogun check-in, there's cameras in your face, and obviously I've had 10 professional fights, so I'm used to it. But absolutely, I can only see that being a net positive, and they do run a damn good show. Shogun does, especially. They have Sheffield Studios, which is a giant production company here in Baltimore, and they educate people, give audio engineering degrees out. But yeah, absolutely. The fight fell through like 15 minutes before, but was supposed to be fighting for a promotion in Virginia, actually 2 summers in a row, and they both fell through. But the one that I was there, it's like I had fought in amateur fights that seemed to be more conducive to the professional than this, you know. So I think it'll be, if anything, a net positive, just being used to the cameras on you, the interviews, blah, blah, blah. All shit that I really feel like dealing with.
And it is like, you know, at Shogun, and for people that aren't familiar with it, Shogun Fights is a local promotion, has about 2 or 3 events a year right here in Maryland, mainly in Baltimore, sometimes at the National Harbor near DC. But like you're in actual locker rooms, you know, like it's not like you're in some storage closet at a bingo hall, which, you know, I've been in as a competitor. I've had to stay in those before. Like it's getting ready for. One of the ones that you were talking about, the Virginia-based one, that's one of my, and just peek behind the curtain, guys. You know, I've also trained, as I've talked about before, at Ground Control. I've, you know, take jiu-jitsu and actually teach a few jiu-jitsu classes there. So Tucker and I know each other pretty well. And I've been following his career since the start of it. But I remember one of them in Virginia. It must have been the most frustrating. It was, you're getting ready, your music's being played, and all of a sudden the fight's off. Like, talk to me about that one a little bit.
Yeah, so it was in Virginia, about an hour drive. I really like sleeping in my own bed if I can, so I went down day before weigh-ins for professional MMA. So I came back home, drive it was like an hour and 10 with no traffic. And so what actually happened was they come in, and the commission, the state of Virginia Athletic Commission's a fucking joke. Fuck all of them. He comes in, the guy's a total dickhead, and is like, Tucker Lutz, your fight's off, just like that. And I was like, well, that's professional. Didn't tell us anything. So then they started giving us, like, they moved fights around. They added an intermission, and we don't know what's going on. I'm warming up with Coach Carl Coos, who's mostly, he's a Rosedale guy. So we have no idea what's going on. If the fight's on, the fight's off. So they say the fight's back on. And this was such a bullshit promotion. Like I said, I fought amateur events better than this piece of crap event. So their whole thing was they had a whiteboard in our locker room, if you could call it a locker room, and it was like in a community center. And when fights were over, they'd come and take the eraser and take it off. So they said that we're back on. I hear walkout music, like my walkout music, and then the commissioner just comes in, erases my name's like, next fight. And I was like, okay, good communication there, bro. But essentially what happened is, I guess the dude had an extreme bout of diarrhea beforehand. So I fought in April at 45, had an awful cut. I actually got second-degree burns from chemicals in the hot tub from cutting weight. I had 4 days off and jumped right back into a training camp, busted my ass for it. I was working at the golf course at the time. So we were in the middle of our tournament. So I was working probably 55, 60 hours a week on top of that. And then just so I have it ripped away by a quasi, I'm skeptical about diarrhea.
So you're about to go out, and the guy says, "I'll fight off. I have bad diarrhea."
Yep. So that was a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah, what the message that the fans got to it was they play this dude's music, and he's about to walk out, and then he's like, "Hey, I gotta go to the bathroom," and runs over there and starts using the bathroom and locks himself in there. And then like when they came out and talked to the people in the stands, it was the commission was like, "Hey, you got 10 minutes," and it was like, "F you." It's like, "Hey, like, come on, dude, like we need to go," and it's just like this guy just locked himself in the bathroom and wouldn't come out. At least that's the story that I heard.
He's not embellishing. He actually locked himself in the bathroom per people not associated with our team. And that was like after they called it off, then they said it was on, and then they gave him a time frame of come out of the bathroom, and and once given that ultimatum, he just decided he's like, fuck it, I'm not fighting tonight. So it was pretty deep.
And it seemed like the majority of the people that bought tickets to the event were there to see Tucker Lutz. That had to have some pretty pissed off people driving all the way back to Baltimore. I don't know how many people were at the event, but it seemed like you always bring a huge following to it. And it seemed like 3/4 of the people there were there for you.
Well, I don't quite remember. Luckily, I remember because my pay was based off. It was an incentive. It was a joke incentive-based contract. The whole promotion was a joke. It was a good matchup, and we wanted to stay busy. So it's an incentive-based contract. So I remember not making much because typically I sell quite a bit at home. This one, I think maybe I sold like 30 tickets, but to begin with, there was hardly anyone at this crowd. The tickets were way overpriced. You couldn't drink there. There's no alcohol, so it was an awful promotion, man. That was one of the darkest days in my MMA career, to be honest.
And now you talked about like the incentive base, the different levels of pay that you see, even now, like in with Contender series. Talk to me about like where the money comes from. What are your revenue sources as far as when you're a professional fighter? How can you make money, and about how much is it?
Yeah, so luckily at home, I make most of my purse is based off ticket sales. So Shogun, it's obviously a business relationship, but if you sell tickets, and it's a awesome arena, it's like you said, the professional aspect of this event, as far as regional scenes go, it's second to none in my opinion. Obviously, I'm a little biased. I know the guy who runs it a little bit, and I have 2 belts there, so I'm going to be talking it up, obviously, but. So I make most of my money off ticket sales back home, and also I've been lucky that some local businesses have sponsored me. So essentially, it's and they give you money for advertisement, or they give you services, or what if it's a supplement company, maybe they'll throw you some some supplements or whatever. But it's like I said, it's not enough to live off a year round. That's for damn sure. It's like you're talking thousands. Now there's some guys like Micah. I never know if it's Terrell or Terrell. Out of like the Crofton area, who sells an absurd amount of tickets, and I think he can probably live off that whenever he fights. But me, I've always had to work a full-time job. It's in the thousands. It's not in the 10,000s. But even where I'm fighting now, it's disclosed, so I might as well say it's 5,000 a show, 5,000 to win. People think, 10,000, man, you're going to be rolling in it. Not really at all. For me, I'm trying to be as savvy with my money as possible, so I'm going to be setting some aside for Uncle Sam right off the bat. Yeah, management fees, and and a lot of this costs money to train. I got gym fees. I got seeing different coaches, physical therapy, which has been a game changer for me. I would pay an arm and a leg for that. I don't care. It's been getting me to the dance way easier. But it's hard to make a buck in here. So once I get this contract, anyone watching who want to do some local endorsements would be greatly appreciated. I'd love to represent your business.
No, that's awesome. And now you talked about show and win bonuses. That's something that's a little bit different than boxing, correct? Like normally boxing, when you sign up, you agree to a price that you're getting paid, win or lose. In MMA, it seems to be double. You agree to amount to show up and fight, and it doubles if you win. There's a little bit of gamble on yourself towards it.
There is. I wish they would do away with it. Like Joe Rogan talks about it all the time. No one's going to fight any harder if they have lump sum. You know what I'm saying? There's no way. it's not. I don't think it's a great incentive. But it is what it's the system that we have to work with. There is some guys in the upper echelon who get lump sum. That's the Connors, that's the Andersons, that's the Brock Lesnars of the sport. So you're talking the 0.01% of earners get the lump sum. But I absolutely wish they would move in that direction.
And you said you're making 5 and 5 for this one. How's the other aspects to it? You obviously don't have ticket sales that you normally get a percentage of for this fight. Sponsorships have been supporting you. How have people been supporting Tucker Lutz? In advance for this fight?
Yeah, so no ticket sales, which has honestly been awesome. Obviously, it's nice getting the extra money, but ticket sales are a pain in the ass. People always wait till last second. I don't want to sound ungrateful, but you would know. You've been in there. People would be disgusted to know how many people will hit you up while you're balls deep in a weight cut, and you're. It's at their convenience. It's just that's kind of why I wish someone would do like a documentary on the local scene to see what people go in on a they're doing all this and maybe they'll come out with $5,000 on the back end, if they're hustling. But so luckily I've had, cause with all the COVID, some of the first stuff to get chopped is marketing. So I didn't really reach out to anyone, but I've been extremely fortunate. My buddy Andrew Rowden over Diamond Exchange, York Road in Cockeysville, owns a fine jewelry business, and he reached out to me. He helped me out this camp. Baltimore T-shirt, who I've been with since day one of my career as a professional, and I've went to high school with Sam Sherfy, the owner's son. They reached out to me and made some shirts, and I did really well with selling those, which has been great. Ryan Fowler's Guitar Experience. I'm a musician, and he reached out to me. He's helped me out in past fights. He reached out to me. So yeah, I've been lucky to have some of the same sponsors who have been able to float it even during COVID that came and support me during this camp. So I'm stoked about that. So like I said, I took 4 weeks off. We were planned on obviously being frugal during that time, but luckily we didn't have the stress of only one income, because I own a house and all that, and get car payment and all that shit gets stressful,
Absolutely. Now, Baltimore T-shirt, it's they make your shirts as part of a sponsorship that has the other logos of the other sponsors on it as well. And then those ones you sell to supporters as well. So your teammates and your friends and family and fans can go ahead and purchase those. Is there anywhere somebody can get one?
So what happened with this one, Sam actually surprised me. He's like, "Hey man, I dropped these shirts off." Like I came home and he's like, "Hey, drop these shirts off. Let me know if you like them." And he made like a small run. I put them on my Instagram, and like they blew up. So I was like, you know what? I'll make a run. So this one there's probably not going to be any available. So I was like, I did it. I was like, all right, I'm taking orders till Saturday, and ended up doing really, really well. I did long sleeve and shirt and short sleeve. But the apparel is something that I'm going to be putting a good bit of my focus on after this one, because people love it. And this one, it says, it's got my name on it. It says clean work, which is my motto.
Let me cut you off real quick. I'll just go ahead and help out. I probably should have done this a little earlier.
Yeah, no worries. Let me see.
Hey, they're not available. You can't hook a brother up.
I can't. Maybe after this fight, but I sure can't right now.
Might as well. My wife and I both ordered some, in advance with it. But yeah, it's got some of the logos. I
think I only got the gyms on the back. Like I said, he made them as a surprise. So he was like, I have no idea what business is. So I got all my gym logos on there, Baltimore T-shirts logo on there. Anyone needing any type of screen printing or embroidery, they're killing it, man. They put out such a good product. They're so creative, so passionate, personable. So I love them. Thank you, Mr. Steve and Sam. And
it says on here, clean work only, which before I cut you off, you started talking about being your motto. Tell me about that. Talk to me about clean work only.
So it actually started off with HVAC jobs. I'll put on like my Snapchat. So I've been running HVAC jobs for about a year. I've been doing it 2 years total. Yeah, obviously I started off as an apprentice helper, and then I started running jobs about a year in. And so the mechanic who I trained under, my good friend Brian Edwards, he's top mechanic at our company, Arundel Cooling and Heating. And one of the things that he hammered in most was having aesthetically pleasing work, because not every homeowner is going to really get the grasp of, the function of the unit. But as long as it looks good, 9 times out of 10, they're going to be pretty happy with it. So when I started doing my own work, like I said, I put some serious pride in the product that I put out, because, we're such a good company out of Rundle. I think that we're the best in the state personally, but I'm biased. So I'd be putting on my Snapchat, clean work after posting some of those things. And then it kind of just everything I do, the landscaping at my house, the striking sessions I do, technique and jiu-jitsu, it's clean work only. It's got to be aesthetically pleasing.
Sure. Now it's so that's no reference towards like whether it be eating habits or supplements or steroids or anything like that. It's all about the work that you're doing.
The exact opposite in those regards.
Just to clarify, Tucker does not, or nor has he ever taken steroids. So
that's what I'm looking my retirement. The first thing I'm doing is getting on exogenous hormones for sure. I'm very much looking forward to that.
It's a good lesson for all those high school and junior league kids that are listening to the podcast.
Hey, wait to retire. Wait to retire. That's what Uncle Tuck has to say.
No, that's awesome. We appreciate definitely. I mean, I know how busy it must be. It's a week out, and I know that you've got 1,000 other things to do, I'm sure, and completely stressed out over the opportunity. But is there anything else on your mind that you want to touch base on before we let you go here?
No, I just really want to thank my team over at Ground Control, because with the timing of this, it was pretty much everyone came in off of the couch. We got the call like literally I want to say it was either the day or 2 days before our gym was cleared to open from the governor. And people have been nothing but supportive and gracious. And it's a lot a lot of these guys, they don't live in Owings Mills, so it's a lot to ask for. And I pretty much kind of had the reins on what I wanted to do. So Jesse Stern, Skylar Sudo, Pat Rivera, Kevin Fulmore, I'm probably forgetting people, Sean Souser, my coaches, John Vu, Nick Ehrlich. My head cornerman's kind of an asshole, so I'm not going to give him any shout-outs. But
yeah, we don't like him.
But no, it's at the end of the day, it's not just me going in there and getting this contract. It's a whole squad full of guys, and I'm just super pumped with, like I said, seeing these fight team numbers. I'm going to be out for the next 2 Fridays, so I hope these motherfuckers are accountable and show up. But I think there's going to be, not just with Ground Control, but with the DMV in general, there's going to be a lot of people nipping at my heels to get in that. Like, we got some serious talent in the room.
No, absolutely. No, it's the premier spot to train if you're interested in training MMA or getting into MMA. Not everybody there is a fighter, as we talked about in the advertising show. Ground Control's actually sponsored a couple of our episodes. So Not everybody there is a fighter. Some people just are there for fitness or self-defense or whatever. But really, really good fight team made up of hardworking guys, and Tucker being one of them.
Sorry to cut you off, but I would say honestly, as a whole. Because I think that can be intimidating to some. I would say probably 10% of less of our member base actually is competition. So you don't need to be coming in, like I said, probably 10% of less people actually take head contact. You don't need to be pursuing what I pursue to come in and get in shape to join my second family. You know what I'm saying? It's a bond like no other. Some of the nicest people I've met, all walks of life, And I also want to give a big thank you to Ant, who's another manager at the gym. So he's really helped me out my jiu-jitsu this camp, and he's a great guy. He's kind of he's really good with the membership directing and all that. So any questions, reach out to him, and he'd do a better job pointing you in the right direction than the other guy who works there.
Sure. No, he's definitely has his act together. So no, that's awesome, man. Where can people find you?
So I'm on Facebook. I got a fan page. I don't go much on my personal account. So if you go on Facebook and like my fan page, I think it's just Top Gun Tucker Lutz. I'm on Instagram at Top Gun Tuck. I have a Twitter. I never use it, so I wouldn't waste your time looking at that. It's probably like a 5-year-old mopey tweet after I lost my pro debut. So.
Gotcha. Now it's next week, and it's September the 1st, so it's going to be this week or maybe even tonight, depending on when this episode drops and airs. It's going to be the Dana White Contender Series brought to you by the UFC. Tucker Lutz is fighting on it. It's what channel can they find that?
So it's on ESPN Plus. There is a paywall. I think it's like $5 a month, but my event is not pay-per-view, so it comes with the subscription. So ESPN Plus. You can also buy UFC pay-per-views. They have free events going on there. They have basketball. They have all sorts of. I don't really watch sports like that, but apparently they have all sorts of different sporting events going on that, and it's been pretty solid streaming platform from what I hear.
Awesome, Jason. Do you got anything else, buddy?
Nah, man. Thanks a lot for your time, and we'll be watching.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on, y'all.
No, guys, it looks like, we're once again, we're just closing down here. But, Tucker Lutz, pro MMA fighter, threw out a challenge, it seems like, to some of these local wrestlers, whether once they get done high school or college wrestling, putting the challenge out to give it a try, see if it's made for you. A lot of people, they don't realize, how easy it is for them to adapt with a wrestling background. Also making out to see Shogun Fights, the local MMA competition in the area. More than anything else, I'm challenging everybody to tune in to ESPN Plus. Tucker Lutz fighting on the Dana White Contender Series brought to you by the UFC. It's going to be on September 1st. Hope you guys can make it. Top Gun Tucker Lutz, thank you for joining us today, guys.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
Cool. Awesome. Well, that's another episode of the CTW podcast. Thank you for the support, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.